Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review in what I am calling the finale in the Gay Nerds Are Not Okay series. So today, I am reviewing The Old Love and the New by Alistair Caradec, and I refer to this as the finale in my The Gay Nerds Are Not Okay series because a little while back, I suck at keeping up with review books, I seemed to get a ton of requests in a short period of time all about books that focused on queer characters, but very dark themes. A lot of dystopian, a lot of space homophobes. And this one, as far as I could tell, seemed the darkest, so I kept pushing it off. But today, we are finally going to jump into it. So this takes place in a futuristic UK wherein the women are all gone. Stick with me here. Okay, trans author, just stick with me. A little bit before the beginning of this story, about 25 years before, there was some kind of infection and all the women were put in quarantine, and then, weird, shady government stuff kept happening. So that's where we're at. And you don't get a lot of details on exactly what the infection was, exactly why it was only affecting women, all of that kind of stuff. Just that everyone is now living in a world where there's literally no women around. Well, there are, but they're all in secretive facilities and no one really knows what goes on in there. And there's a lot of government surveillance, definitely Big Brother kind of stuff, wherein if a bar even plays music with female vocals, they could get fined. That kind of thing. Very, very heavy. And there's a regular address that must always be played. You can't not play it. It's like the Big Brother version of having to say the pledge. And our main characters are Sid and Jamie, these roommates and longtime friends who are basically in that just trying to get by. Sid has been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, and that basically means that he's decided that he's just going to keep his head down and stick to himself. He doesn't really want to get involved in anything else. He's got enough going on in his own head. And so the theme of this book, as you see it play out, is the idea of, is stuff going on in your own life ever a good reason to ignore the greater good? And it is a little bit of a hard read in that it is told from Sid's point of view, so it has the hallmarks of that kind of schizoaffective disorder, wherein he hears voices. A lot of those voices are saying very, very negative things. We have all of the trigger warnings for things like hyper negative self-talk, suicide ideation, all of that kind of stuff. He also is constantly singing the song "It's Raining Men" to himself, but because he's in this world where you're not supposed to focus on women-created media, he has to kind of keep it secret, but that's his comfort song. And he's also got a gigantic crush on Jamie, but he's not really come to grips with his own queerness, which was a little bit strange to me over the course of the story, because in a world where there's literally no women, or at least no cis women, I should say, there's been this increase in queer men, or at least men doing things with other men just by sheer not having women around. It's either, they still have transphobia, so a lot of them don't want to sleep with a trans woman. So, okay, if you don't want to sleep with a trans woman, I guess you're going to have to do other, queer stuff. What do you want? But he's still struggling to come to grips with that, which, again, was slightly strange to me, considering the fact that he basically grew up in a world where there were no cis women. There is a trans woman in this story, FYI, but suddenly they come across a cis woman who has escaped from one of these facilities and has kind of stumbled across them, and Jamie insists that they help her. Sid doesn't want to. He thinks I got enough going on. He's struggling at his job. His meds aren't always working, all of that kind of stuff. But Jamie's like, no, we need to help her. And so they bring in Olivia, and Jamie decides to start interviewing her on this recorder to find out what these quarantine facilities were like. And it will be a surprise to no one that is even remotely familiar with any kind of dystopians. They're not good places. And as things go on, Jamie insists that they need to get this out there. They need to do something to reveal the horrors of what's going on in these places. And of course, Sid doesn't want to, and he starts taking a kind of downward slope. There's another couple in the story, Nick and Charlie, who are kind of like the older version of Jamie and Sid, in that you have one that really, really wants to, you know, be a dissident and fight back, and one that is just tired of it and can't do it anymore. So there's a lot of that kind of, how do you do this? How do you fight against such giant evil, such giant injustice, and not lose yourself, or not, you know, leave a detriment to yourself? And as far as I can tell, the theme of it seems to be, yes, you need to go out and do those things, but also don't be stupid, don't do them alone. You need, that's why Nick and Charlie become a thing. You need a greater network of people. No one's going to save the world on their own. No one's going to overthrow entire dystopian governments on their own. And the story is very much self-contained. You don't really know what the rest of the world looks like. If the rest of the world has this, had this disease, if they instituted anything similar, it's very much focused on here. It does not give a lot of exposition. It's very much focused on the day-to-day. How would living in this kind of era, how would needing to do these kind of rebellious things affect someone's day-to-day life, which I actually liked. I don't like giant amounts of exposition to begin with, and I don't really need to know the political ins and outs of exactly how the voting went, because they voted for this quarantine, and you get this gist that a lot of the men, older men that voted on it, like, came to regret it, or they're lying to themselves about how it actually went. A lot of that kind of, definitely a sub-theme of the way you vote matters, and contrary to popular belief, the way you vote can directly affect your life negatively. Yes, positively as well. But the focus here is voting can affect your life negatively if you're not actually voting for the greater good. And it was just heavy. Now, I was a little bit worried for how the ending was going to go, because a lot of authors, because of the way Western media works, Western media wants a really happy ending, but you can't give a real dystopian a real happy ending, because there's no way to fit it in with the realism. A single person or a small group of protagonists is not going to totally overhaul an entire evil government that's been set up for decades by the end of I believe this book was a little over 400 pages. There's no way to realistically do that. And it was a realistic ending. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's definitely one of my favorite kinds of endings for these kind of books, where it's realistic in that you're not going to walk away with only the warm fuzzies. That's not. But there is reason to hope. But even that hope is in a purview where it makes sense. Like, less of the everything's totally good and fine now, and more of a we have steps moving forward kind of ending, which is about the most realistic kind of ending, like the happiest kind of ending you can give a realistic dystopian. So in general, this is definitely one of those books where it's really impactful. You're gonna feel it. You're gonna be thinking deep thoughts, but it's also very dark. There are some really big dark moments. One of them I did not see coming. Another one of them I did. There is one suicide attempt. Just one? I can't remember. A lot of suicide ideation, a lot of dark thoughts. But I did enjoy reading that kind of perspective of someone with schizoaffective disorder. Because that's not a disorder I am well versed in, and it's also a disorder that has a lot of misinformation about it. So shining a little bit more light on that in a day-to-day, daily life setting was really interesting to me. This, in general, is one of those books that you will feel, I can't say feel good, you will feel satisfied having read it. You will maybe feel artsy having read it. I cannot see this being a book that is going to become like a reread favorite for anybody. I cannot see this being a book that is going to become a comfort read for anybody. It forces you to think about a lot of daily troubles that we have already. But I did like that there was a trans character, and how she was almost taken in to one of these quarantine facilities as a woman, and then once they found out, all like horrible verbal abuse happened, and her wife, oh, they were so cute, even in the mentions in passing. But in general, very dark. Be prepared, you know, gird your loins mentally going into this one. But I do think that if you're going into it knowing what it is and being prepared and wanting that kind of deep thematic dystopian, you will enjoy you will appreciate that you have read it, and just maybe it's one of those you read it through once and then you're good. All of that to say, I gave it 5 stars. Now, if you are an indie author and you would like a review, something like this one, you can let me know. I will have all my info down in the description below. Please be sure to read through my review policy. It answers a lot of questions and saves us a lot of time. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.